appropriate, including opening some land for development. But I suppose it's best to know nothing. I would love to yield briefly, and if I don't have enough time to respond, perhaps you could yield to me.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. I understand the gentleman's comments, and I know the hearing yesterday addresses the issue which is separate from this. And listen, we should have that debate, we should have that discussion. This issue is an administrative secretarial order that, to the credit of Secretary Salazar, they withdrew. It was confirmed, by the way, to be withdrawn because of the CR we passed that takes us through September 30th. The Secretary, to his credit, said, I'm going to abide by that. But as has been pointed out, the order has not been withdrawn. This debate here is about next year's funding. So until we get clarification on that order, or the order is withdrawn, this language is appropriate. And that's simply all we're saying. Now, we can get into a discussion whether you should have a discussion whether wildlands is in fact a designation or not. And as a matter of fact, wildlands has no definition whatsoever administratively. So there's a question on our side, obviously, if they can even do that. Because wildlands may be synonymous with wilderness, but wilderness can only be designated by the Congress. And that is a concern that we have, and that's why I think the language that was put in an appropriation bill takes care of next year. And I say, to the credit of the Secretary—
Reclaiming my time, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies for interrupting you. And
the gentleman's time has expired.
I ask unanimous consent 1 more minute so the gentleman can finish his remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for an additional 1 minute.
Perhaps it might be easiest if you were to strike the last word and we'd have 5 minutes to finish the debate.
Well, I was not going to strike the last word. I was just going to respond to the gentleman, but I may if I am. But I think it's important just to clarify that.
I'll take the 1 minute. Thank you for that accommodation. I think the underlying problem was well described by you, and that is that the language prohibits the Secretary from going forward with the study of the wildlands. I think that's wrong. I think it's appropriate for us to always update our studies, always to understand what has changed, what is appropriate as we go forward.
Will the gentleman yield?
Of course.
If the gentleman remembers, because he was in a committee hearing, under direct questioning, I think it was Director Abbey said that there is no authority to make any designation under law of wild lands because that was a made-up term. There is no designation. Can they inventory? Yes. Nobody argues with that. But you can't make up administratively a new designation, and that's what the issue was. And he testified that he had no authority to do that. Thank the gentleman for yielding.
Well, I think you're down to parsing words here. The study that was attempted to be undertaken by the Secretary was to study the lands for their wildland values. He obviously could not designate a wildland. It doesn't exist. But that study could give us information that we would need to open land for drilling or other purposes, or to hold it aside for scenic and other values.
Thank you. From Idaho.
Move to strike last word.
Gentleman from Idaho is recognized for 5 minutes.
You know, Mr. Chairman, this debate is always fascinating. I got to tell you, if rhetoric were fast food, there'd be golden arches over all of these doors. Because I've never heard so much rhetoric in my life, and I hoped that the gentleman from California actually read the report. Maybe he did, and maybe these pages got stuck together. I don't know. But if you look at the report, he says that we don't care about the lands and the designations. We just want to use them up and all that kind of stuff. Let me read for the record what the report says. As mentioned in the introduction of this report, the committee lauds the Department of Interior for its significant changes in the wildlands policy and notes that the Bureau of Land Management has, to this date, been in compliance with the fiscal year 2011 continuing resolution prohibiting funds for the use of Secretarial Order 3310, which was to designate, and as the gentleman said, he couldn't designate wildlands because that policy didn't exist, and he can't. And he's in compliance with that. It continues, while the Department is now rightly requesting the input of members of Congress, senators, and the public, the committee is concerned about the internal direction given by the Bureau of Land Management regarding the inventory of lands managed by the Bureau. As the Department has stated, inventories of Bureau lands are required under the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976, FLPMA, and the committee agrees with this reading of the Act. The committee points out that inventories should, however, cover all land uses, multiple use, not just lands with wilderness character. The values to be assessed include wildlife, fish habitat, non-motorized and motorized recreation, hunting, fishing, grazing, conventional and renewable energy development, mining, wilderness character, forest management, and aesthetics. All of these values are important, and one value does not supersede the other. The committee also directs the Bureau to use the definition of wilderness as defined in 1964 Wilderness Act as directed by Section 603 of FLTMA. The committee will continue its oversight of this issue. The Secretary has done the right thing by withdrawing his policy of wildlands designation, a designation that he made up. Only Congress can designate a new land designation.
Well,
that's what Congress does.
Would the gentleman
The Secretary agreed with that, withdrew it. We have no problem and encourage them to go on with the inventories for all of the characteristics of public lands. So the gentleman's comments relative to, oh, all we care about is mining and flattening the land or whatever he said, is just rhetoric. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. The reality is, if the Secretary carries out what he says he's going to do, this amendment probably isn't necessary. If they decide to reverse course, then it was necessary.
Well,
if they do what they said they're going to do, it's absolutely won't have any effect, as the gentleman from Utah said. I'd be happy to yield.
When I was the Deputy Secretary at the Department of Interior, I thought that the Department of Interior should do what it needed to do. Now that I'm here, I would agree with you that they should do what we tell them to do, just a change in jobs. However, the point here is that the language that you've put into this bill would preclude the Secretary from moving forward even to carry out the words that are in the document itself, and I did read the document. We need to know what is on the land. We need to know its potential uses. As I understand the amendment that you've put forward, that's in this bill, that it would deny the funding for those purposes to do the study. Now, if I'm wrong about that intent and effect of the amendment, then we've had a wonderful debate in which we all agree that the Secretary and the Department of Interior should continue to always study the land and to take into account new information, new science, new knowledge, new GPS or satellite photos of the land. So I think, as I understand the amendment and the intent of the amendment, it is to stop the Department from continuing to study these multiple attributes.
Well, reclaiming my time.
Please.
The secretarial order, which is in question, needs to be withdrawn, and then he needs to issue a new one which doesn't include this new designation of wildlands, because that still stands out there, even though he says he's not going to designate any new wildlands. And I'd be happy to yield from the gentleman from Utah.
The ability to designate and study and do these inventories comes under FLTMA regulation, which is not changed by this amendment.
That's exactly correct.
This amendment only deals with the category that was called wildlands, which is a made-up category that has nothing to do with any kind of law. Is it not true that the Secretary and the Interior Department can still do inventories on any consequence, but they are not allowed only to do an inventory for one characteristic? They can inventory for all characteristics they're supposed to, and that comes in FLTMA?
The amendment deals with the secretarial order, not just wildlands.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
I rise to strike the requisite number of words.
The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 5 minutes.
Section 124 prohibits expenditures for the Bureau of Land Management to carry out its duties under Section 201 of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976. Secretarial Order 3310 states a policy that the Bureau of Land Management should act consistently with Section 201 of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act and maintain a current inventory of land under its jurisdiction and identify within that inventory the resource values, including wilderness, of those lands. Despite what some have claimed, it does not create de facto wilderness. It returns BLM wilderness policy to the way it operated for 27 years before being unilaterally changed by then Interior Secretary Gail Norton in 2003. It directs the BLM to develop recommendations to Congress regarding wilderness land designation and it directs public involvement in the development of those recommendations. Section 124 removes the requirement for public involvement and removes the requirement for the BLM to provide recommendations to Congress. Section 124 doesn't prevent Congress from designating wilderness. It just prevents us from being properly informed before we consider these designations. Secretarial Order 3310 is the kind of good government process that encourages public involvement and forward thinking. As a demonstration of that forward thinking, the Secretary reached out to Congress in June asking for members' input into the wilderness characteristics of land within their districts. I'm not sure what more we can ask for then from the BLM and the Secretary, but an open public process, as Mr. Moran has stated. Section 124 seeks to foreclose that process, a process that the majority in the committee report on H.R. 2584 applauded. These wildlands have real benefit, economic, environmental, and aesthetic. It's important that we protect not only public land in its natural state, but our ability to make informed decisions about what areas should or should not be designated wilderness. We need the secretarial order, and we need to be informed. And I would yield to the gentleman from California if he would like to make a final comment here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleman from Washington doing so. It's useful to read, and the characteristic of Order number 3310, which is the subject matter, was well described by the gentleman from Washington. If one were to read the order basically directs the Bureau of Land Management to continue to do its studies for the purpose of identifying those lands that have wilderness characteristics. This is exactly what I was talking about when I raised my first point, that this particular section that is in this appropriation bill, Section 124, fits directly with the piece of legislation that was authored by Mr. McCarthy and was heard in Resources, the subcommittee, yesterday. And that is to terminate efforts to create wilderness areas in the United States. That's what this is all about. This is about opening lands to development and to prohibit the Department from exercising its authority under the law to continue to investigate and to analyze our land for the value of its wilderness characteristics. Therefore, this particular clause, 124 in the appropriation bill, runs directly counter to the requirement under the existing law that's been there for more than 3 decades for the Department of Interior through the Bureau of Land Management to carry out its responsibilities.
Would the gentleman yield? Would the gentleman from Washington yield?
It's not my point. It's up to
asking
the
the
gentleman
As
from
soon as
Washington.
the gentleman's finished, I'll yield. You yield?
Yes.
Okay. I yield to the distinguished chairman, who I just heard a few minutes ago praising Secretary Salazar for the way he conducts himself, and he's a good man.
That has nothing to do with this.
And now 33-110 is like the Communist Manifesto.
Part of the reason I was praising him because he came over and sat down and listened to us and realized that there was a problem with Secretarial Order 3310.
Well, then why don't we trust him?
I trust him.
Well, then why do we have this amendment?
Why is this, what does it hurt? It doesn't hurt a thing. What the gentleman is suggesting is because we are essentially saying you can't follow Secretarial Order 3310, that means you can't follow FLTMA, which requires the inventory of these lands. They still have to do the inventory of the lands under FLTMA, whether or not there is a Secretarial Order 3310.
Well, excuse me if I can reclaim my time.
No, you don't have the time.
The gentleman
I have the
from
time.
Washington's time has expired.
I ask unanimous consent for 1 additional minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from Washington has an additional 1 minute.
I yield to the gentleman from California.
I thank the gentleman from Washington and our colleague on the other side. It's useful to read the secretarial order rather than all of the hula-paloo about what this is about. The secretarial order follows the law. It says that the BLM shall do an analysis as to the wilderness characteristics. That is in FLTMA. That's the law. And so it says that's what it's doing. Now, whatever the rhetoric of the report
Are
might
you
be...
suggesting that this provision says that he shouldn't follow the law?
I believe that's precisely what they're trying to do, is tell the Secretary not to follow the law.
Would the
Of
gentleman
course I yield to the distinguished chairman.
It is absurd to think that repealing a secretarial order which does not supersede federal law somehow changes the underlying federal law. It does not. FLTMA still exists.
No,
whether
the
the
point-
secretarial order is there or not.
Reclaiming my
Secretary
remaining
Norton
13
did it,
seconds.
so, yes, I yield
Reclaiming
back.
my 13 seconds.
yield
In
back,
fact,
yield.
the secretarial order does follow the law. It precisely follows the law. So why would you want to repeal?
Where are wildlands in the federal law?
Committee will come into...
Tell me.
Let's vote on the
Committee will come to
amendment.
order.
I
Gentleman
yield
from
back.
Washington, time has expired.
Mr. Chairman,
Who seeks recognition? Gentlewoman from Wyoming. What purpose does she rise?
I move to strike the last
The
word.
gentlewoman from Wyoming is recognized for 5 minutes.
I would yield a moment of my time to the gentleman from Utah.
The gentleman from Utah is recognized.
I didn't want it, but thank you. Let me just simply try and come up with this one last time. The idea of inventory is covered in FLTMA. That doesn't change. Secretarial order that established wild lands is a new policy. That has been superseded by another secretarial order. It doesn't have an impact on this, which is one of the reasons why the administrative policy says it is unnecessary, given the department's policy that includes collaboration with stakeholders, to identify public lands that may be appropriated. The administration's not fighting this thing. They're on board with us. All we're saying is the reason you want to keep this language in here until the supersession has taken place and the entire thing is repealed and you go back to FLTMA is in case someone wants to litigate outside of it and try and force the Department of Interior to do something it has said it will not do. That's what we're about here. All these other arguments in here are extraneous. Its relationship to other legislation does not have any impact whatsoever. This is simply saying what the policy is and what the policy they're going to continue will be substantiated in the statutes in case someone else wants to play around with it. I yield back to
Would
the
the
gentlelady
Secretary-
from Wyoming.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman. So the point is this. The administration does not object, as I understand it, to the language of my amendment. The executive order, if it were repealed, would allow FLTMA to function as it is designed in the law. The problem that has been called to my attention is that the executive order has not been repealed. Secretary Salazar communicated privately with Chairman Simpson and Chairman Bishop that he did not intend to enforce the wildlands order, but the order is still in place. So until the order is withdrawn, this amendment is necessary. Democrats strongly opposed including this language in the committee level. They've offered this amendment today, and then the President has threatened veto because this language might be in the bill. Now, given that development, my initial skepticism on including this language is long gone. I'm not even skeptical anymore. Clearly, there are those who still want the Secretary to operate outside his legal authority and declare wilderness or wild lands areas without Congress. Only Congress can do that. Now, there's plenty, and I yield to the gentleman from Washington.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I'm glad the gentleman suggested.
Point of order.
The
Doesn't she have to remain
gentlewoman
standing?
will rise.
Right, excuse me.
I'm glad that the gentleman brought up Secretarial Order 3310 because that's what we're talking about here. Now, the first sentence under Section 1 purpose reaffirms, it says in the Secretarial Order, about the protection of wilderness characteristics. Nobody is arguing about that at all. Then you go to page 2 of the Secretarial Order, Section 4 policy, and it goes on through the process of inventorying and so forth. And the last sentence is the problem where we have our heartburn. And it says, and I will quote, where the BLM concludes that protection of wilderness characteristics, which nobody argues about, is appropriate, the BLM shall designate these lands as, quote, wild lands, end quote. Now, that is a made-up definition. Nobody argues about the inventory part, but now all of a sudden they're superseding and suggesting that there should be a new designation called wild lands. That is what the problem is. They have no authority to do that. And they affirmed that, by the way, in testimony in front of our committee. And the part of the Interior bill simply says we're not going to fund that. And until the secretarial order is withdrawn, this one here that says wildlands, once this is withdrawn, you're right, there's no issue. But it hasn't been withdrawn. That's why that language needs to stay in there. It's nothing more complicated than that. And I thank the gentlelady for yielding.
Thank you. Reclaiming my time, this issue is not just an academic discussion on this floor. People in the West are terrified that the Department of the Interior is going to create a new category of lands called wild lands that will be managed differently than the law provides.
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. In the opinion, the amendment is not agreed to. Clerk will read.
Page 64, line 20, Title II, Environmental Protection Agency, Science and Technology, $754,611,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2013.
What purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise?
Amendment to the desk occurring on page 65 and line 5, and also would ask unanimous consent. I actually have 3 amendments, but all on the same subject, but one amendment touches line 21 and one amendment touches line 73. In the interest of comity, I would ask unanimous consent that I be permitted to offer all of those amendments en bloc.
Is there objection to considering all 3 amendments en bloc at this reading? Hearing none, the clerk will designate. Will the gentleman from Ohio specify the amendments in the correct order?
Well, the first one is an amendment that occurs on page 65, line 5. The second amendment is an amendment that simply says page 65, line 21. And the third amendment is page 73.
The clerk will report the amendments.
Amendments offered by Mr. LaTourette of Ohio, page 65, line 5, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $20 million. Page 65, line 19, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $13 million. Page 65, line 21, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $60 million. Page 73, line 19, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $50 million.
50.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair. You know, there's a lot going on in Washington, Mr. Chairman, and I would tell you that people back home think we can't get along, but this is a great example of how we're going to get along, and I'm going to become the second member of this subcommittee to say something nice about a member of the Democratic Party, and that's the President of the United States, Barack Obama. President Obama became the first President of the United States in history to recognize that we needed to put real money into Great Lakes restoration. Those of us who live in the region selfishly know it, and those around the world know it as about 20% of the world's fresh water. And we've nickeled and dimed and sort of moved along with some nice legislation in this House, some of it written by one of our former colleagues, Mr. Ehlers of Michigan, the Great Lakes Legacy Act. But it wasn't until President Obama, and I suspect that his then Chief of Staff, the new Mayor of Chicago, Mr. Emanuel, was whispered in his ear because he was certainly conversant with these issues, that we need to address the Great Lakes as an ecosystem and make sure that we deal with it appropriately. And so President Obama proposed $475 million a couple of years ago for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. However, as so many things occur around here, that went from $475 to $300, and now in this bill we find it to be $250 million. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is designed to mitigate toxic substances in the Great Lakes, to reduce the impact of invasive species, to improve near-shore health, and reduce non-port solution, improve habitat and reduce species loss, and improve the information engagement and accountability in the program overall. And I just want to focus on one of those, and that is the invasive species, and not the invasive species that come in ballast water. This is an invasive species that is swimming up the Mississippi River. It's the Asian carp. Now, the Asian carp and I have something in common. The Asian carp can eat 20% of its body weight a day. And this Asian carp, if it is successful in breaking through the electronic barrier and getting into the Great Lakes, will devastate that entire ecosystem. So this is important. And I know that there are some members who are going to say, well, I love the Great Lakes. I love the fact that the President made this designation. You're right, we need more money, but what doesn't need more money in this bill? And the account from which I'm taking it, climate change. But I'm going to tell you something right now, that if we don't take care of the Great Lakes, 20% of the world's fresh water, we're not going to have to worry about climate change because we're all going to be dead. We need to make sure that we protect this valuable resource. And on this instance, Ms. Jackson, the administrator at the EPA, has been really a great partner in implementing these programs. She has over 300 projects underway at this current time. So I know this is a heavy lift. I know that it's selfish, but I would tell you that it's not selfish because the Great Lakes continue to be the treasure of the world, and there's going to come a time when water is the new oil when it comes to an important resource. So urge members of the House to please support this amendment and yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Anyone seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Idaho.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
This is really hard, Mr. Chairman. But given our allocation, we had to cut many EPA programs, including programs we support like the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. In the base bill, we reduced nearly every EPA geographical program below the 2011 enacted levels, in addition to providing none of the requested increases. Despite the cuts, restoration of the Great Lakes remains a committee priority, as demonstrated by the fact that the Great Lakes program is the largest recipient of funds in the geographic programs. It's the largest geographical area also, so you would probably expect that. While I appreciate the intent of the gentleman's offset, where he offset this from, we cut EPA's climate budget by $23 million, and it's easy to vote against funding for climate change or the increased funding that we have put into climate change. The chairman's mark, and believe it or not, there are some EPA programs we support under the climate change heading, including research and development of new automotive technologies, including the hydraulic hybrid technology for trucks, carbon capture and sequestration, and initiatives to increase methane transmission. The reality is that over a period of time, because climate change is now the key phrase, that if you want to get money for climate change, or you want to get money for your basic science, you call it climate change. Just like after 9/11, if you wanted money for some program, you called it national security, homeland security. That was the key phrase. Now climate change is the key phrase. So a lot of the requests from the administration have been basic science programs that have been going on for a long time but have been shifted over and called climate change. So while we looked at the funding for climate change and the increase that had occurred in this budget over the years and that had been substantial, the fact is when we looked at them, many of them were just basic science that needed to be continued, so we couldn't just go out and eliminate all the climate change or reduce it, I believe, any more than we did. And climate change took I believe it was $82 million hit, $83 million hit in this bill. We see the same thing happening in the Department of Interior, where base programs have been reclassified as climate change. So we really need to be careful about what we are using as an offset under the administration's classification of a climate change program. In addition, funding for the Great Lakes restoration efforts grew from $60 million in 2009, $60 million in 2009, to $475 million in 2010. Therefore, at the chairman's mark, the $250 million funding for the Great Lakes is still 4 times above its historical levels. And again, it continues to be a committee priority, as evidenced by the fact that the Great Lakes program is the largest recipient of funds in the EPA's geographical programs. If I felt we could fund the Great Lakes at a higher level within our allocation, then believe me, I would have done so. I would have done anything to avoid this debate with the gentleman from Ohio. But unfortunately, even though the gentleman makes a good point, and I agree with him, and if we had more money in the allocation, I'd be more than happy to do it, it's the offset and where it comes from that causes me some concern. I'd be more than happy to yield.
If I seek to amend my amendment to say Great Lakes Restoration Fund / climate change, will the gentleman give me my 50 bucks?
Well, that would be one of the overall problems with the title, climate change. But I would have to oppose the amendment and urge my colleagues to vote no on it.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from Minnesota rise? Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I thank the gentleman from Ohio for his work on the Great Lakes. I represent a Great Lakes region in Minnesota, and I think, as the chairman pointed out, the climate change has been cut, Great Lakes have been cut, and I'm here to tell the gentleman from Ohio I think we can have a win-win even without supporting your amendment. The reason being is by leaving the dollars where they are into climate change, I think we can count on and through our work make sure that what is happening to the Great Lakes is documented and proven so that the facts are out there about what we need to do about climate change. I'm going to refer to 2 examples. One is from a local paper of mine, the Star Tribune. It's from July 13th, and it's from it talks about how with climate change that they're seeing in Lake Royale and Lake Superior, it used to be too cold for deer ticks, but not anymore. I mean, scientists are watching the effects of climate change and what is happening to the Great Lakes region. The ticks that carry Lyme disease have been found for the first time on the island off the coast of northern Minnesota, and at the end of the century, nesting loons may disappear altogether from most of the Great Lakes. Now, these are findings from a report on the effects of climate change on the Great Lakes, and it talks about also its effect on on 5 of the largest national parks and public waters that we share in our region. The series of studies have concluded that the current and future effects of warming or global climate change on national parks from California to Virginia and the consequences of it. But if people think that that is not hard enough to really kind of get to make sure that we do climate change, that we look at what is going on in the Great Lakes, let me speak from another report that dealt with shipping on the Great Lakes. And I will enter for the record which reports I used. But let me quote from this. It says, the expected higher temperatures of climate change are predicted to increase water evaporation, lower runoff, reduce ice formation, raise surface water temperatures in the Great Lakes, resulting in a fall of lake levels. The increased precipitation will not be sufficient to completely offset the reduction in lake levels. For international commercial navigation in the Great Lakes, the impact of lower lake levels will be restrictions in vessel draughts, tonnage carriage, thus increasing the number of trips and total cost to move any given tonnage of cargo. In other words, climate change on the Great Lakes has an effect on the economy. And I know that the chairman did not have, in my opinion, sufficient allocations to address many issues I care passionately about climate change, including the economic consequences of climate change, as well as do some of the funding that the gentleman from Ohio and I both sought in the Great Lakes. But I think that the gentleman's from Ohio could actually see benefit to the Great Lakes in research by not having his amendment move forward and keeping the dollars that we do have for science and climate change. With that, as the chairman says, with great risk, I would yield.
No. You're going to like this. Actually, the deer tick is misnamed because it really doesn't come on a deer. It comes more on the little gray mouse because the gray mouse is closer to the ground. And if you treat a cotton ball with an appropriate substance, you can relieve that from the deer ticks, not only in Minnesota, but here in Virginia and also in Ohio. And I thank the gentlelady for yielding.
And I thank the gentleman for sharing. I know how to remove leeches, deer ticks, fish hooks, Yeah, I've been out there. But I really do think the members should reject this amendment and leave the dollars where they are, and we need to work harder to put more dollars into our environment, not only for its natural beauty and to leave a valued treasure to our children, but also because it has a direct impact on the economy of many of our states. With that, I yield back.
Gentlewoman from Minnesota yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I must agree with the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee to object to this amendment. I want to make a number of points. One is that the amendment adds funds for what are called geographic programs. It's a pretty broad category. It includes the Chesapeake Bay, the Puget Sound, Great Lakes, and other water bodies that need restoration projects. So if the amendment passes, I trust the gentleman understands that the funding will be and should be divided up amongst all of those programs. Now, I do support the efforts of the Congress to clean up the Great Lakes and to deal with these invasive species. Clearly is a very serious problem. That Asian carp is just horribly destructive. But I think it's worth pointing out that it was during Democratic leadership in the Congress that the Great Lakes Restoration Project received its largest increases. In fiscal year 2010, the program received $475 million. In this current year, they're getting $300 million. With all due respect, it would seem that the funding level of $250 million, which is in this bill, in a bill that cuts far more dramatically many other programs, would be seen as something of a success. I think that, if anything, Mr. Simpson should be thanked for protecting this program. The Chesapeake Bay program, I mean, I'll let Mr. Dix speak about Puget Sound, but Chesapeake Bay was funded at $17 million below the request. It's only getting $50 million. Now, I understand the gentleman's frustration that more could not have been done in this bill for all of the geographic programs. But the reason why we are in this position of underfunding these admittedly critical water programs is because of two actions. And I know the gentleman will remember those two actions because he supported them. One was the so-called Ryan Republican budget resolution that the gentleman voted for, and the second was the 302B allocation to the Interior Department. I think that set the stage. It really set parameters that were far too tight to be able to provide the kind of funds for many programs, including Great Lakes restoration, that are needed. Now, another point that needs to be made is that the GAO reported to the committee, and I quote, "Progress remains slow as the program has delisted only one of the 31 areas of concern." EPA officials said the program set less ambitious goals for fiscal year 2012 because it has had such trouble to meet past goals. The agency did set lower goals in 2012, then it does seem to make some sense that reduced funding might be appropriate for those lesser goals. But I also want to point out that the offset is really untenable. It reduces EPA's science account and environmental programs with what I think is the express intent of cutting additional climate change and clean energy programs. Now, I also want to point out, and I know that the gentleman offering the amendment may not be excited about this, but it does seem a bit hypocritical. The gentleman offering this amendment to add funds for the Great Lakes restoration also offered language which was put in the bill to defund the Great Lakes restoration over the ballast water standards. That amendment would
well, the
say
gentleman
that
yield
Great
when you're
Lakes
done.
Well, I will when I'm finished.
That's what I asked.
That's what I asked. When I'm finished,
when you're done, please yield.
I believe I have the time. So
I said please yield when you're done.
I have time. I will yield to you at the appropriate moment. If we want to help Great Lakes get the kind of money they need, it doesn't seem to me we should be offering amendments which would completely defund all EPA programs for the states bordering the Great Lakes if they don't meet adequate ballast water standards, which is the amendment the gentleman put in the bill. So I think that's sufficient number of points to urge defeat of the amendment. And now I will be happy to yield to my very good friend from Ohio.
Well, I thank the gentleman very much, and I wanted you to yield because you've mischaracterized the other part. What the other piece of language in the bill does, it says to the state of New York, I'd ask unanimous consent that the gentleman be given an additional minute so we can finish this discussion.
Without objection, the gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
And the gentleman yields to me. I thank you so much. You know that there are 8 states that border the Great Lakes. One state in particular, New York, has imposed ballast water exchange in innocent passage that can't be met by any technology that exists today. That set of standards will literally cripple and bring to a halt all waterborne commerce in the Great Lakes. My amendment says, listen, if you want to impose that kind of standard, you're not going to get any money until this thing gets sorted out when the EPA and the Coast Guard come up with a uniform ballast water exchange. But let me just tell you, since you're talking about the regional programs, the Great Lakes are unique. The Great Lakes are unique in the world. And I can remember a couple of years ago, Senator Dodd, he wanted to have Lake Champlain become a Great Lake. And I said to the distinguished senator at the time, Lake Champlain is a good lake, but it's not a Great Lake. The Great Lakes are the 5 Great Lakes that every grade school learns, Holmes, on how to identify them. It's 20% of the world's fresh water, and if we don't take care of them, as the President of the United States has recognized we needed to do in a big way, we're going to be in trouble in this country, and I thank the gentleman for his courtesy.
The gentleman's time has expired. The question is on the amendment en banc offered by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latourette. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Ohio.
As for the ayes and nays.
The gentleman from Ohio asked for a recorded vote.
I'd like that very much, yes.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latourette, will be postponed. What purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas rise?
I have an amendment at the desk. Page 65, line 5.
Clerk will designate. Clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Ms. Eddie Bernice Johnson of Texas, page 65, line 5, insert and Texas, page 65, line 5, insert and fellowships after development.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
What purpose does the gentleman from Idaho rise?
I reserve a point of order on the gentlewoman's amendment.
Point of order is reserved. What purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas rise?
I'd like to strike the last word to speak on this amendment.
Gentlewoman from Texas recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My amendment would simply highlight the long-standing role of EPA in supporting the education of our nation's top environmental scientists by inserting the word fellowships after research and development in the science and technology account. EPA currently awards us fellowships, and thus my amendment has no scoring impact and does not authorize a new activity. I realize that my Republican colleagues will surely not agree to this amendment, but they have to agree that science is the underpinning of great and good environmental policy. As a scientific arm of EPA, the Office of Research and Development supports world-class research and development activities to protect human health and the environment. Supporting the next generation of scientists and engineers through fellowships is just one way the government supports the kind of critically important research that private industry and academia alone cannot and will not do. With no real justification or detail. The committee's report language for this bill specifies that funds are not provided for fellowships programs amounting to a substantial $17 million loss for this bill. Lab equipment cannot operate itself. They cannot publish important papers or make groundbreaking discoveries, which creates jobs. That requires people, and EPA has a history of fostering some of the nation's top young researchers that have gone on to apply their talents across government, academia, and industry. For instance, since 1995, EPA has awarded approximately 1,500 STAR fellowships. Turning our backs on the next generation of academic researchers, government scientists, and science educators and environmental engineers all but ensures that we are doomed to make bad, uninformed environmental decisions for the future. I realize that the gentleman's point of order I do not agree with, but I'm sure that he will be upheld by the parliamentarian. And so I simply would ask that if we could work together to try to preserve some of this talent that we have already put in place and some of the equipment that's already in place to continue groundbreaking research that is going to be one of the few ways that we're going to develop good, sound jobs for the future. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back. Let me wait for the ruling.
Mr. Chairman.
What purpose does the gentleman rise?
Mr. Chairman, while I appreciate the gentleman's what the gentlelady is trying to do and actually agree with what she's trying to do, I must insist on my point of order against the amendment because it provides for an appropriation on an unauthorized program and is therefore violates Clause 2 of Rule 21. Clause 2 of Rule 21 states in pertinent part an appropriation may not be in order as an amendment for an expenditure not previously authorized by law. Mr. Chairman, the amendment proposed to appropriate funds for an earmark that is not authorized. The amendment therefore violates Clause 2 of Rule 21 and asks for a ruling from the Chair.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the point of order? Gentlewoman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I accept that point of order, but I would like to appeal to the chairman of this committee to work with us and see if we can preserve some of the investments we've already made and some of the talents that are in place. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Chair is prepared to rule. The amendment expands the eligible uses of appropriations in pending paragraph to include fellowships. As such, it proposes to appropriate for that purpose. The proponent of an amendment of an item of appropriation carries the burden of persuasion on the question whether it is supported by the authorization in law. Having reviewed the amendment and entertained argument on the point of order, the Chair is unable to conclude the item of appropriation in question is authorized in law. The Chair, therefore, constrained to sustain the point of order under Clause 2A of Rule 21.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
What purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise?
I seek to strike the last word.
The gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, as somebody who has spent many years working with people in my community and around the country on promotion of livable communities, I am frankly mystified to see included in this bill an end to the program that provides technical assistance and guidance to communities who are looking for ways to increase economic development, plan for economic growth, and make their communities safer, healthier, and more economically secure. It is mystifying. The EPA Office of Sustainable Communities was established to provide a resource for communities who need technical assistance to plan for economic growth, to deal with development, to account for a changing population and the demographics, to expand their economic development options, and make communities more attractive to business and local citizens. Mr. Chairman, there are hundreds of examples from across the country about the work that the Office of Sustainable Communities has accomplished. Some of the most important projects were situations where the Office of Smart Growth has helped in brownfield redevelopment. These are very complicated problems for local communities where they help turn unusable, polluted land into land that's ready for development. This helps create housing and business opportunities and provides cities with important foundation for planning future growth. This is precisely the sort of thing that we should be doing to help communities leverage resources and prepare for the future. In Iowa City, Iowa, the Office of Smart Growth recently received approved a grant to redo their downtown riverfront area after the 2008 flood devastated that community. With the help of EPA, they created a plan with input and support from local elected officials, business leaders, local residents. It's helped regenerate the downtown business area while preserving green space and recreational areas for families who are moving into the newly redeveloped residential buildings. Closer to my side of the continent, just picking at random, communities of Driggs and Victor in Idaho received a Smart Growth Implementation Assistance Grant to help analyze the barriers and opportunities of infill development in support of downtown revitalization effort. This small federal investment helped communities take advantage of public-private partnerships and redevelopment opportunities that helped revitalize these small rural towns. Hundreds of other communities across the country have received similar assistance under the Smart Growth Program, but these cooperative efforts would come to an end under this House legislation. The services offered by EPA's Sustainable Communities Office are in high demand. They've been able to assist only 9% of the communities that are interested due to existing budget constraints. In addition to their technical assistance work, the Office of Sustainable Communities is engaged in a partnership that we all should be supporting and encouraging between HUD, the Department of Transportation, and EPA. The Partnership for Sustainable Communities enables these three departments to work together to ensure that federal funds work in conjunction with each other, break down the silos that frustrate us all, to ensure that the federal funds are spent as efficiently as possible, and eliminate duplicative processes. Despite the obvious connections between housing, transportation, and land use, we all know and have been frustrated that in the past the three agencies have not always worked well together as we would like. But Secretaries Donovan, our former colleague LaHood, Administrator Jackson, and the agency have spent these last 2 years cutting down the red tape and the coordination to meet multiple economic, environmental, and community objectives, while also cutting red tape and working to partner better with local communities. The EPA's Office of Sustainable Communities helps fill a critical need by providing assistance and support to local communities. I find it ridiculous that at a time when this type of help is needed more than ever, when there is nary a member of Congress who hasn't been frustrated by about the lack of coordination and implementation, that the House is now considering ending critical support to communities looking for ways to jumpstart their own economic recovery, improve the quality of life for their communities by making the federal government a better partner. This is something that there should be no geographic, regional, partisan, or ideological divide. This is an outstanding program. It deserves to be supported, and I hope as this bill works its way through the process that we find a way to retain this valuable service. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Oregon yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from Hawaii rise? The gentlewoman from Hawaii is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, beside me is a picture of the Cuyahoga River in 1952. The river is on fire. The reason for this fire is that the river was heavily contaminated with flammable industrial waste. This water was dangerous to drink, needless to say, and to swim in. Fish and wildlife could not survive here. Flooding in this river would have spread pollution onto shore and into neighborhoods. In short, this pollution was dangerous for the health of the people and the communities that depended on this river. It was incidents like these that helped raise public awareness of the dangers of water pollution. Ultimately, that awareness became government action, including the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, in 1970 and passage of the Clean Water Act in 1972. The EPA's purpose is simple: to protect human health and the environment. It does this by ensuring minimum standards for water quality nationwide while acting as a referee between the states. Despite this important mission, this bill slashes the EPA's budget by 18% from current levels. And of course, I rise to speak against this underlying bill. It also includes a number of riders that will prevent the EPA from carrying out duties it is already legally required to perform. I don't know why the majority is so keen on undermining the vital mission of the EPA. I hear them talk a lot about the cost of certain EPA regulations, but what about the cost of getting rid of these regulations? One serious cost that would go up is the cost of public health. The impact of polluting our air and water isn't a speculative matter. We know that it will make people and communities sick. More mercury in the air we breathe means more deaths and debilitating illnesses. More water pollution means families and communities will be subjected to a variety of health risks. In short, more pollution means rapidly escalating health care costs. Another cost is the cost to our environment. Our rivers, coastlines, and wetlands are the places that we take our children to experience the wonders of our country. This is where their interest in the natural sciences and the outdoors are kindled. Polluted waters and coastlines mean less wildlife, poorer fishing, and a lot less beauty in this world. We have to remember that we are merely stewards of our natural resources, and the cost of polluting those resources isn't only borne now, it'll be borne by future generations. Finally, the EPA helps to ensure a fair playing field for businesses. This helps keep their long-term costs manageable. It's a simple fact that a few dollars in prevention is far, far cheaper than expensive cleanup costs later. For those that disagree or question that, I encourage you to contact BP Oil. That company will and should be paying for their damage for years to come. So those are the costs the EPA helps to mitigate. That's why we need the EPA. We need a referee that is empowered to make sure that everyone plays by the rules and protects our natural resources. If we pass this bill, we are essentially rejecting the referee from the game for calling misconduct on certain players, and this will only encourage more misbehavior in the future. Take a look at this picture. Is that what we want? This bill is so flawed, there is little hope for it. I hope that my colleagues will reevaluate their approach in this legislation, pull it from the floor, and go back to the drawing board. I yield the remainder of my time.
Gentlewoman from Hawaii yields the balance of her time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands rise?
I rise, Mr. Chairman, to strike the last word.
A gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we should be here today passing a clean debt ceiling and creating jobs, but in these challenging times of high deficits and a fragile economy, when it's critical that our limited spending priorities be focused on programs that can achieve results and encourage the creation of jobs and economic growth, the majority is instead bringing an unprecedented attempt to gut pollution controls and public health protections in order to give bigger profits to big oil and other special interest polluters. By attaching more than 3 dozen policy riders to H.R. 2584, the House GOP is attempting to use a spending bill to make backdoor changes to 40 years of important federal legislation, federal laws. H.R. 2584 makes drastic spending cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency, as you've just heard, and the Department of Interior, and fuels a multi-front assault on America's air, water, lands, wildlife, and public health, and severely undermines the environmental integrity of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. In doing so, this legislation cripples the budget of key federal agencies charged with protecting American citizens and natural resources. The bill is laden with contradictions and regressive reforms. It slashes funding to the Environmental Protection Agency by $1.8 billion, yet restores $55 million in oil and gas subsidies. It dramatically cuts the U.S. Fish and Wildlife budget by 30%, zeroes out funding to list new endangered species. It reduces the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration budget by 18% lower than the President's 2012 budget and wholly eliminates funding for NOAA's Climate Service. It cuts Land and Water Conservation Fund by 80%, a program that has been critical to my district, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and everyone's district. H.R. 2584 renders this program funding to its lowest level in its history. And it cuts $9.7 million from the National Endowment for the Humanities, threatening support for teachers, community colleges, museums, libraries, and archives for important historic documents, and many others, as well as preservation projects that enhance local economies and create jobs. Another program that's affected is one that's near and dear to my community. That's the National Heritage Area program. I've recently introduced a bill to create a National Heritage Area on the island of St. Croix, which we have been looking forward to, not only to preserve and protect some of our local historic treasures, but as a badly needed economic development tool and that would create jobs. National Heritage Areas are some of the most effective public-private partnerships for resource conservation and heritage tourism supported by the federal government. National Heritage Areas have matched every dollar of federal support with $5.50 of other public and private funding, demonstrating a high yield of return on federal resources. I'm appalled that this bill puts so much energy into tearing down America's foundational environmental protections, especially as a representative of a place with some of the highest greenhouse gas emissions per square mile in the country. Instead of working on the bigger, looming issue of our deficit crisis, this bill flies in the face of decades of bipartisan support for the protection of public health and environmental issues. It does not put the American people first as it should. It further endangers them by allowing for more dangerous air pollution. It does not clean up urban and other critical waterways. It threatens the clean water that millions of our constituents depend on. It shuts the door on endangered species and ties the hands of our federal agencies. As leaders, we should not advance a budget that eliminates critical protections that our constituents so desperately need. We should not turn a blind eye to corporate polluters while holding the right of our future generations to clean health and a clean environment hostage, just as the leadership is holding the well-being of the poor and middle-class Americans and the economic security of our country hostage to an absolutely necessary lifting of this debt ceiling. And so, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, I urge all of my colleagues to vote against the Fiscal Year 2012 Interior and Environmental Appropriations Bill and any anti-environment and anti-public health and anti-American amendments that may be offered. I thank you and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from the